Childhood trauma is often misunderstood as something loud and visible raised voices, conflict, or moments that leave clear emotional scars. But some of the most profound wounds are shaped not by what happened, but by what never did. No one came when you were overwhelmed and didn't understand why. No one sat with you long enough to ask what you were feeling and truly listen. No one reflected your emotions back to you in a way that helped you recognize them as real and valid. This kind of absence leaves no obvious trace, no single memory you can point to and say, this is where it started. Instead, it creates something far more subtle and difficult to name. The child growing up in that environment does not think something is wrong. There is no clear moment of breaking, only a quiet adaptation. They learn, without ever being taught directly, that their inner world does not matter, that their feelings do not require attention, that needing comfort leads nowhere. Over time, emotional silence becomes normal. The absence of response becomes expected. And so, the child adjusts not by demanding more, but by needing less. This adaptation is not a conscious decision, but a deeply intelligent response from a developing mind trying to survive in an environment that offers no emotional feedback. As they grow, this early experience quietly shapes how they relate to themselves and others. They may struggle to understand their own feelings, to trust their emotional experiences, or to believe that their needs deserve space in a relationship. The wound is invisible, but its impact is not. It lives in the background of every connection, every moment of self-reflection, quietly influencing how safe it feels to be seen, heard, and understood. Children are naturally wired to depend on others for emotional and physical support, and in a healthy environment, those needs are met with attention, care, and consistency. But when those needs are repeatedly ignored, dismissed, or met with indifference, the child does not continue asking indefinitely. Instead, they begin to adjust. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Slowly and often unconsciously, they learn that needing others leads to disappointment, so they start to reduce those needs altogether. They stop reaching out, stop expressing vulnerability, and begin to rely only on themselves. Over time, this creates a version of independence that looks admirable from the outside. They seem mature, capable, and emotionally strong, able to handle situations on their own without burdening anyone else. But beneath that surface is something very different. This independence is not freedom, it is protection. It is a survival strategy designed to avoid the pain of being ignored or rejected again. The child learns that it is safer to expect nothing than to hope for something that may never come. As they grow into adulthood, this pattern remains. They may struggle to ask for help, even when they genuinely need it, because doing so feels unfamiliar and risky. What appears to others as strength is often a quiet adaptation to an environment that did not allow them to depend on anyone in the first place. Hyper-independence is often admired in modern society, seen as owing to strength, resilience, and capability. People who handle everything on their own, who never seem to need help, are praised for being self-sufficient. But beneath that image lies a very different story. This kind of independence is rarely a natural preference. It is often the result of repeated experiences where reaching out led to disappointment, neglect, or rejection. At some point in childhood, a quiet conclusion is formed. If needing others leads to pain, then it is safer to need nothing at all. This belief does not develop consciously, but it becomes deeply embedded in how a person navigates the world. Over time, they begin to rely only on themselves, not because they trust their strength, but because they do not trust that others will be there when it matters. This creates what can be described as a psychological fortress. It protects them from the vulnerability of unmet needs, from the risk of being let down again. But like any fortress, it also keeps people out. As adults, they may appear confident and capable, able to manage life without assistance. Yet internally, they often carry a quiet sense of isolation. They struggle to let others in, not because they do not want connection, but because connection requires trust, and trust feels unsafe. What looks like strength from the outside is often a carefully constructed defense against a very specific kind of hurt. Emotional connection does not develop automatically. It is something children learn through interaction with caregivers who help them understand what they are feeling. In a healthy environment, a child's emotions are noticed, named, and reflected back to them. When a child cries, someone says, "You're upset," or "That hurt you." And in doing so, they create a bridge between raw sensation and conscious awareness. But when this mirroring is absent, when emotions are ignored, dismissed, or treated as unimportant, that bridge is never built. The child still feels everything, but those feelings remain undefined, unrecognized, and difficult to process. Over time, the mind adapts by disconnecting from the emotional layer altogether, because feeling without understanding becomes overwhelming and pointless. This is where alexithymia begins to take shape not as a lack of emotion, but as a lack of access to it. As adults, these individuals may find themselves unable to answer simple questions like, "How do you feel?" Not because they are hiding something, but because they genuinely do not know. There is a gap between what their body experiences and what their mind can identify. They may observe others expressing passion, sadness, or joy with clarity, and feel a quiet distance from that experience, as if they are watching from the outside. This disconnection is often misunderstood as emotional coldness or shallowness, but it is neither. It is the result of a system that was never properly developed, a missing link in emotional learning. The feelings are there, but without language, without recognition, they remain out of reach, making it difficult to fully connect with oneself and, by extension, with others. Over-explaining is often mistaken for thoroughness or responsibility, but in many cases, it is rooted in something much deeper. When a child grows up in an environment where their preferences, choices, or feelings are constantly questioned, dismissed, or criticized, they begin to internalize a subtle but powerful belief. Nothing they do is valid on its own. Every decision must be justified. Every action must be defended, and simply existing as they are is not enough. Instead of being allowed to choose freely, they learn that approval is conditional, something that must be earned through explanation and logic. Over time, this becomes automatic. As adults, they may find themselves giving long, detailed explanations for small things: why they were late, why they chose a certain option, why they feel a certain way, even when no one is asking. It is not about the present moment, but about a past where being misunderstood or criticized felt inevitable. This habit becomes a form of self-protection, an attempt to prevent judgment before it happens. But underneath it lies a deeper need, the need to prove that their choices are valid, that their perspective makes sense, that they have the right to take up space and make decisions without being challenged. What looks like over-communication is often a quiet reflection of a person who was never given unconditional permission to simply be. Chronic apologizing is often mistaken for politeness or kindness, but in many cases it reflects something much deeper and more painful. When a child grows up in an environment where their needs are overlooked, where caregivers are emotionally unavailable, distracted, or overwhelmed, the child begins to sense that their presence requires too much. Without anyone saying it directly, they learn that expressing needs, taking up space, or asking for attention creates discomfort for others, so they adjust. They become quieter, easier, less demanding. They try to exist in a way that causes the least possible inconvenience. Over time, this adaptation becomes internalized as a belief: I am a burden. As adults, this belief shows up in constant, automatic apologies for things that are not mistakes, for things that are not their fault, even for simply existing in shared spaces. They apologize when someone bumps into them, when they ask a question, when they need something small. It is not about manners, but about safety. Apologizing becomes a way to soften their presence, to preempt rejection, to reassure others that they are not asking for too much. But beneath each apology is a quiet message shaped long ago. I'm sorry for being here, for needing anything at all. What looks like humility is often a lifelong habit of shrinking oneself in order to feel accepted in a world that once made them feel like too much. Children who grow up in emotionally unstable or unpredictable environments quickly learn that safety depends on understanding the people around them. Instead of developing a stable sense of self, they become highly attuned to shifts in mood, tone, and behavior. They watch closely, often unconsciously, trying to anticipate reactions before they happen. This heightened awareness is not curiosity, it is survival. If they can read the room accurately, they can adjust themselves to avoid conflict, rejection, or emotional withdrawal. Over time, this creates a pattern of constant adaptation. They change how they speak, what they express, even what they feel, depending on who they are with. From the outside, this can look like strong social intelligence, empathy, or charm. They seem easy to get along with, flexible, and emotionally perceptive. But beneath that surface, something important is missing. Because they spent so much time becoming what others needed, they never had the chance to fully explore who they are on their own. As adults, this can lead to a quiet and confusing question that surfaces in moments of solitude. Who am I when no one is watching? The answer is often unclear, not because they lack depth, but because their identity was shaped around others rather than developed from within. What once helped them stay safe now makes it difficult to feel grounded, authentic, or fully known, even in close relationships. When a child's emotions and perceptions are consistently dismissed, ignored, or corrected by the people they depend on, something fundamental begins to shift inside them. Instead of learning to trust what they feel and perceive, they are taught often indirectly that their inner world is unreliable. When they say, "I'm sad," and are told, "No, you're just tired," or when their experiences are minimized or explained away, they begin to question their own reality. Over time, this creates a deep disconnection from their internal compass. Rather than relying on what they feel or know, they start looking outward for confirmation. As this pattern continues into adulthood, it becomes chronic self-doubt. Even small decisions can feel uncertain, and larger ones can feel overwhelming. They replay conversations, question their interpretations, and wonder if they misunderstood something obvious. Trusting themselves does not feel natural, it feels risky. So they seek reassurance from others, hoping someone else can confirm what is real, what is right, what is acceptable. But that reassurance rarely lasts, because the core issue is not the decision itself, but the absence of internal trust. What appears as indecisiveness or overthinking is often the result of a childhood where their reality was not validated. Without consistent reinforcement that their thoughts and feelings were real and worthy of trust, they grow into adults who doubt themselves even when they are right, constantly searching outside for a certainty that was never built within. Many individuals who grow up in emotionally neglectful environments learn early on that the safest way to receive attention or warmth is to be useful to others. Instead of being cared for simply because they exist, they begin to associate their value with what they can provide: support, understanding, problem-solving, or emotional stability. Over time, they become the person everyone relies on, the one who listens, helps, and shows up without hesitation. From the outside, this looks like kindness, generosity, and emotional strength, but internally, it is often driven by a deeper belief: I am valued for what I do, not for who I am. As a result, receiving care becomes uncomfortable. When someone offers help or support, it may feel unfamiliar, even threatening, as if there is an unspoken expectation attached. They may deflect, minimize their needs, or quickly return the favor to restore balance. Accepting care can feel undeserved, or worse, like a debt that must be repaid. This creates a quiet imbalance in relationships, where they give consistently but rarely allow themselves to receive. Over time, this pattern leads to a form of loneliness that is difficult to recognize, because they are always surrounded by people who appreciate them, yet still feel unseen at a deeper level. The inability to receive is not a lack of desire for connection, but the result of a learned belief that love must be earned through usefulness rather than freely given. Healing does not begin with dramatic change or a complete transformation of who you are. It begins with a quiet shift in understanding. The patterns you carry: hyper-independence, emotional disconnection, constant self-doubt, the need to over-explain or apologize, are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something once happened around you, or more accurately, something was missing. These behaviors were intelligent adaptations, developed at a time when you had no other choice. They protected you, helped you survive, and allowed you to function in an environment that could not fully meet your needs. But what once kept you safe is no longer necessary in the same way. The world you live in now is different, yet your mind continues to operate as if the same conditions still apply. This is why these patterns begin to feel heavy. They start to limit your ability to connect, to trust, to feel fully seen and supported. Healing, then, is not about rejecting these parts of yourself, but about recognizing them for what they are and slowly learning that you no longer need to rely on them in the same way. This process happens in small, almost invisible steps. It might look like expressing a simple preference instead of saying, "I don't mind." It might be pausing for a moment before saying sorry when nothing actually went wrong. It might be allowing someone to help you with something you could have handled alone, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. These moments may seem insignificant, but they begin to rewire the belief that your needs are a burden or that you must handle everything by yourself. Over time, as you repeat these small acts, something begins to shift internally. The protective armor you built starts to loosen, not because it failed you, but because you are learning that you no longer need it in the same way. And in the space that opens up, something new becomes possible: real connection, where you are not just useful, but known, not just present, but seen. Healing is not about becoming someone else. It is about allowing yourself, perhaps for the first time, to exist without constantly protecting against a past that is no longer happening, and to accept that your needs, your feelings, and your presence were always worthy of care.